They said the ocean was calm that night, but the ocean was lying. Emily Carter felt it before anyone else, a strange stillness pressing against her skin as she moved across the polished deck of the luxury yacht, balancing a tray of untouched champagne glasses while the Atlantic stretched endlessly around them, dark and quiet, and far too smooth for a night this deep at sea. She had worked double shifts before, served wealthy guests who barely looked at her, but tonight felt different, like the air itself was holding its breath. "Don't think about it," she told herself, adjusting her uniform as laughter echoed behind her, music playing too loudly, people pretending nothing in the world could touch them out here. That's when she noticed him again. Cabin 12. He stood near the railing, alone, not drinking, not speaking, not even moving much, just watching the water like it was speaking to him. Emily had served hundreds of guests, but something about this man didn't fit. His reflection in the glass door behind him was faint. Not gone, just wrong. She swallowed, forcing herself to step closer. "Sir, would you like anything?" she asked, her voice steady, professional. He didn't look at her right away. When he did, it felt like the temperature dropped 10 degrees. His eyes were dark, too deep, like there was something ancient behind them. "No," he said quietly. His voice wasn't cold. It was controlled, measured, like he was choosing every word with care. Emily nodded quickly, stepping back, her heart beating faster than it should. "Walk away. Just walk away." But as she turned, the ship shuddered. Not a wave. Not wind. Something else. The music stuttered. Glasses trembled. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Emily froze. Then it happened again. Harder. The entire yacht tilted slightly to one side, just enough to send a ripple of panic through the room. What was that? Someone laughed nervously, but no one answered. Emily's fingers tightened around the tray as she looked back at the man from cabin 12. He hadn't moved. Not even a step. Not even a blink. And then, slowly, he smiled. Not at her. Not at the people. But at the ocean itself. And for the first time that night, Emily realized something she couldn't explain. The danger wasn't coming from the storm. It was already here. The third tremor did not feel like a wave. It felt deliberate, like something beneath the yacht had made a decision. And this time the tilt did not correct itself as the floor angled sharply and the tray slipped from Emily Carter's hands, crystal glasses shattering as they hit the polished deck and slid away into darkness while the lights flickered twice and then dimmed to a sick, unstable glow. Voices rose all at once, confusion turning into fear as guests grabbed tables, walls, anything that would hold them steady. And somewhere deeper in the ship, a metallic groan echoed upward like the hull itself was under pressure, far more pressure than any normal storm could cause. Emily caught herself against a column, her breath shallow, heart racing, every instinct telling her to move, to get to safety. But the exits were already crowded, and the crew was shouting conflicting orders. Stay calm. Move to the upper deck. Wait for instructions. None of it sounding convincing anymore as the ship shuddered again, and this time did not stop. Water. She heard it before she saw it. A distant rush turning into a roar as cold seawater forced its way into the lower levels, rising fast, too fast, and the realization hit her all at once. This was not damage. This was failure. Something had gone catastrophically wrong. She turned, searching for anything that made sense, any sign of control, and her eyes found him again, the man from cabin 12, still near the railing, still unmoved, as if gravity itself did not apply to him, his coat barely shifting while everything else descended into chaos. "Sir," she called out without thinking, her voice almost lost in the noise. But he heard her. Of course he did, his head turning slightly, not in surprise, not in concern, but in quiet acknowledgement, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. The ship lurched harder, sending a wave of water across the deck that soaked Emily to the waist in seconds, the cold biting into her skin, stealing her breath as people screamed and rushed past her. But she did not move, not this time. Because something in his stillness anchored her, something terrifying and steady at the same time. "What is happening?" she asked, her voice shaking now, unable to keep the fear out of it. And for a second, just 1 second, his gaze softened, not with kindness, but with recognition, like he had seen this moment before in another time, another place. "You are standing," he said quietly, his voice somehow cutting through the chaos. At the edge of something that was never meant to surface, and then his eyes shifted past her, toward the dark water rising behind, and the faintest smile touched his lips again, not amused, not cruel, but inevitable, like a truth finally revealing itself. And Emily felt it then, deep in her chest, the certainty that whatever was happening to this ship had nothing to do with the storm above, and everything to do with what waited below. The deck dropped another few inches and did not come back, and this time the tilt became permanent, a slow, sickening angle that forced everyone to grab onto something or fall as the water surged higher. Now at Emily Carter's waist and climbing, cold and relentless, dragging loose furniture, shattered glass, and abandoned belongings toward the far end of the ship like gravity itself had changed direction. The air smelled different now, sharp, metallic, wrong, and the distant roar below had turned into something rhythmic, almost like breathing, as if the ocean beneath them was alive and aware. "This is not possible," someone shouted behind her. But Emily did not turn. She could not, because the man from cabin 12 had finally moved. Not quickly, not dramatically, just one step forward, perfectly balanced despite the chaos, as though the angle of the ship meant nothing to him, as though he existed outside of it. "You knew," she said, her voice barely steady, the words escaping before she could stop them, and he looked at her fully now, those dark eyes holding something deeper than fear, deeper than concern, something ancient and unshaken. "I recognized it," he replied, calm, precise, as another violent shudder ran through the yacht, and the lights above them burst into darkness for a full second before flickering back to life, weaker now, fading. The water climbed to her ribs, stealing warmth, slowing her movements, panic rising in her chest as people fought their way toward the upper deck, pushing, slipping, desperate to escape something they did not understand. "Then help us," Emily said, louder now, the fear breaking through as she took a step toward him, nearly losing her footing as the ship shifted again. For the first time, he hesitated, not physically, but in his gaze, like he was measuring something unseen, weighing a decision that had nothing to do with the sinking ship and everything to do with her. "There are rules," he said quietly, almost to himself, and the words sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the freezing water. "Rules," she repeated, disbelief cutting through her fear. "We are going to die." The word hung between them, heavy, undeniable, and for a brief moment, the noise around them seemed to fade, like the world itself was waiting. Then the ship groaned again, louder than before, and something beneath them shifted, not violently, but deliberately, like a massive presence adjusting its hold. Emily felt it through the water, a pressure, a pull, something vast moving just out of sight, and instinctively she reached for him, not knowing why, only knowing that nothing else around her felt real anymore. Her fingers brushed his sleeve, and everything changed. The water around them stilled, not stopped, but slowed, as if time itself had thickened, and his eyes ignited with a deep, unmistakable red that reflected no light from above, only something from within. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then back at her face, and when he spoke again, his voice was no longer just calm, it was absolute. "Stay close to me," he said, and for the first time since the ship began to sink, Emily felt something stronger than fear rise in her chest. Not safety, not yet, but certainty, the kind that came from standing next to something that the ocean itself could not command. The rhythm beneath the water grew stronger, no longer subtle, no longer hidden, and Emily Carter felt it through her legs, through the metal beneath her feet, a slow, deliberate pulse that did not belong to the ocean she had known her entire life. The yacht groaned in response, its structure resisting something far older than steel and design, something that did not rush, did not panic, but pressed upward with patience, as if time itself worked in its favor. She tightened her grip on his sleeve, her breath uneven now, fear rising again despite the unnatural calm surrounding him. Because whatever was out there was not retreating, it was approaching, it knows. "We are here," he said quietly, his voice almost lost in the low hum of the ship's failing systems, yet somehow clearer than anything else in that moment. Emily shook her head slightly, trying to deny what she could not understand, but the water answered instead, rippling outward in perfect circles from a point below them, each wave precise, controlled, intentional. "You mean it is aware?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, and for a brief second, his expression shifted, not in fear, but in recognition, like he was hearing something familiar after a very long silence. "It is not used to being ignored," he replied, and then he stepped forward. The movement was small, but everything reacted to it, the water drawing back just enough to reveal the tilted floor beneath them, the shadows below pausing their slow circling, as if something vast had turned its attention upward. Emily followed instinctively, staying close, her body moving before her mind could question it, because stepping away from him felt more dangerous than anything else around her. The air grew colder, not from the water, but from something deeper, something ancient pressing closer to the surface, and for the first time, the silence between the waves felt heavy, expectant. "Why is it doing this?" she asked, her voice shaking again, unable to stop herself, and this time he did not answer immediately. His gaze fixed on the dark surface as if reading something written beneath it. Seconds passed, stretched thin, until finally he spoke, softer now, but heavier, because something on this ship called to it, and the words landed with a weight that made her chest tighten. Emily's mind raced, searching for logic, for explanation, but nothing fit, nothing made sense, and yet the certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. Another pulse moved through the water, stronger than before, and the shadows below shifted closer, forming shapes that brushed the edges of visibility before dissolving again, never fully revealing themselves. She swallowed hard, her grip tightening as fear and confusion tangled together. "Then make it stop," she said, almost pleading now, and for the first time since the chaos began. He turned fully toward her, his eyes no longer just glowing, but burning with something deeper, something that did not belong to a passenger, or even a predator, but to something that commanded. "I can," he said quietly, and there was no hesitation, no uncertainty in his voice, only truth. "But it will know who spoke against it." And as the words settled between them, the water at their feet stilled once more, not retreating, not advancing, but waiting, as if even the ocean itself was listening for what he would do next. Emily Carter felt the weight of his words settle deep in her chest, heavier than the freezing water surrounding them, heavier than the groaning steel beneath her feet, because this was no longer about survival. It was about something older, something that came with consequences she could not begin to understand. The ocean around them had gone unnaturally still again, not calm, not peaceful, but watchful, like a living thing holding its breath, waiting for a single decision. "Then let it know," she said, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry, and even she was surprised by her own answer, because fear was still there, sharp and undeniable, but something stronger had taken its place, something stubborn, something human. For the first time since the chaos began, his expression shifted in a way she could read, not confusion, not doubt, but something close to respect, quiet and rare. "You do not understand what you are asking," he replied, his tone softer now, but no less serious. And yet he did not step away, did not release her, did not deny her choice. The ship tilted further, a slow, inevitable descent as more water surged across the deck, rising to her chest now, the cold biting deeper. But still it moved differently near him, bending, circling, never quite touching him directly, as if even the ocean hesitated. Below them, the shadows gathered again, no longer distant, no longer vague, but closer, forming outlines that pressed against the limits of visibility, vast shapes that shifted and coiled with deliberate patience. Emily forced herself to breathe, to focus, because panic would not help her now, not here, not with him, standing beside her like a fixed point in a collapsing world. "You said something called to it," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Then it is already looking, already searching, so what difference does it make?" And the question lingered between them, cutting through the tension like a blade. He watched her closely, as if weighing her words against something far older than logic, and for a moment, the red in his eyes dimmed slightly, not fading, but focusing, sharpening into something precise. Another pulse moved through the water, stronger than before, and this time the surface broke just enough for a massive shadow to rise closer, its form distorting the faint light above, a presence so large it made the yacht feel insignificant, fragile, temporary. Emily's breath caught, her body instinctively pressing closer to him, but she did not look away, could not, because the truth was there now, undeniable and immense. It already knows, she whispered, more to herself than to him, and the realization settled like ice in her veins. He followed her gaze, his posture changing almost imperceptibly, from stillness to readiness, from observer to something far more commanding. Yes, he said quietly, and this time there was no hesitation at all, and now it is waiting to see if I will answer. And as the words left his lips, the water around them began to shift again, not rising, not falling, but drawing inward, forming a slow, tightening circle that closed them off from everything else on the ship, isolating them at the center of something far greater than survival. Something that felt less like a disaster and more like a confrontation that had been waiting far longer than this. Night. The circle of water did not just tighten this time. It sharpened, drawing inward with a precision that felt intentional, like a boundary being drawn rather than a trap closing, and Emily Carter felt it instantly as the space around them compressed, isolating them completely from the rest of the sinking yacht, cutting off sound, cutting off movement, leaving only the low, steady pulse beneath the surface. Her breath came faster, visible in the cold air now, as the water rose to her shoulders and held there, not climbing further, not retreating, as if waiting for something unseen to decide what came next. Beside her, he changed, not dramatically, not violently, but undeniably. The stillness he carried before was gone, replaced by something focused, something that did not simply exist within the moment, but defined it. The red in his eyes deepened until it no longer looked like light at all, but depth, something endless and controlled. It is not testing the ship, he said quietly, his voice steady, cutting through the silence. It is testing me. The words settled heavily, and for the first time, Emily understood the truth of what stood beside her, not a passenger, not even just a predator, but something the ocean itself recognized as an equal. The water beneath them shifted in response, the massive shape below no longer circling, no longer observing, but aligning, its presence pressing closer to the surface in a slow, deliberate rise that distorted everything above it. Emily felt the pressure build again, not outward, but inward, like the world itself was narrowing to a single point of confrontation. Then what happens if it does not listen? She asked, her voice low, steady despite the fear tightening in her chest. He did not look at her this time, his gaze fixed on the dark surface as if reading something written beneath it. Then I stop asking, he said. The words landed differently, heavier, colder, and the ocean reacted instantly. The water surged upward. A few inches, not breaking, not spilling, but pressing harder against the invisible boundary he held, as if challenging it, as if pushing back against his presence. Emily felt it through her body, the resistance, the refusal, and for a brief moment, doubt flickered, sharp and dangerous, and then he moved. One step forward, controlled, deliberate, and everything changed. The water did not part immediately. It resisted, holding its shape for a fraction longer than before, enough to prove that whatever lay beneath was no longer yielding easily. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in focus, and when he spoke again, his voice was no longer quiet. "You were summoned," he said, and this time the words carried force, not loud, but undeniable, pressing outward into the water, into the presence below, into whatever ancient thing had answered the call. The surface trembled, the massive shape shifting sharply beneath it, no longer smooth, no longer patient, but reacting. Emily felt the balance shift, the pressure easing for just a second before tightening again, stronger, more direct. "And I answer," he continued, his voice lower now, more dangerous. And this time the water responded differently, not retreating, not yielding, but focusing, drawing inward around them in a tighter, more controlled ring. The ocean was no longer testing the ship, no longer observing from a distance. It was engaging. Emily's breath caught as the surface beneath them warped again, rising slightly, the outline below clearer now, vast and coiled and aware, its presence pressing against the boundary. Between worlds, it is not leaving, she whispered, the realization settling in fully. And for the first time since this began, he acknowledged it with a slight tilt of his head. No, he said, calm, absolute. It is deciding. The water rose another inch, the pressure increasing as the space around them shrank, the unseen presence below pushing closer, testing the limits of his control, of his authority, of whatever rules governed this moment. Emily tightened her grip on his sleeve, her fear returning in full force, but she did not step back. She could not, because whatever was happening now was no longer about survival. It was about something far older deciding whether to yield or to rise against him. And this time, he did not wait. Then it will learn, he said, and there was no restraint left in his voice, only certainty, only command. And as the words settled into the silence, the ocean itself reacted, not retreating, not surging forward, but tightening its hold, drawing inward with a force that felt like defiance rather than obedience, as if whatever lay beneath had made its choice. For a heartbeat, everything froze, the water, the air, even the faint groan of the ship beneath them. And in that stillness, Emily realized the truth that made her chest tighten. This was no longer a warning, no longer a test. This was the moment where something ancient had decided it would not back down. The moment his words settled into the silence, the ocean answered, not with chaos, not with violence, but with presence, immense and undeniable, as the surface beneath them rose in a slow, deliberate arc, lifting just enough to reveal that the boundary between above and below was no longer holding the way it should. Emily Carter felt her breath catch as the water did not spill or crash. It hovered, shaped by something unseen, something that pressed upward without breaking through, as if testing the limits of his command. The cold around her deepened, but it no longer felt random. It felt directed, focused entirely on the space where they stood. She did not move, could not move, because every instinct told her that this moment was not meant to be interrupted. Beside her, he remained perfectly still, but the stillness had changed. It was no longer passive, it was dominant, like a force waiting for the right moment to assert itself completely. His gaze held the surface, unblinking, unwavering, the red in his eyes now steady and absolute. And when he spoke again, his voice did not rise, did not strain, but carried a weight that pressed outward into everything around them. You were not called by accident, he said, and the words felt different, deeper, as though they were not meant for human ears at all. The water trembled in response, a subtle shift that rippled outward before drawing back in, tighter, closer, as if whatever lay beneath was reconsidering, recalculating. Emily felt it again, that distant awareness brushing against her mind, not invasive, not overwhelming, but present, like something ancient trying to understand something new. She swallowed, her grip tightening without thought, because she could feel the tension building, not just around them, but within the ocean itself. The shape below moved again, slower now, less certain, its vast outline shifting just beneath the surface as if it had come too close to something it did not expect to find. It is hesitating, she whispered, and this time he nodded slightly, his focus never breaking. It recognizes authority, he said, and there was no arrogance in his tone, only fact. Another long moment passed, stretched thin across the surface of the water, and then the pressure changed. The arc beneath them lowered, not collapsing, but easing, the surface flattening inch by inch as the massive presence below withdrew just enough to create space. Emily exhaled sharply, relief flickering through her chest, but it did not last, because the withdrawal was not complete. It was measured, controlled, like something choosing to step back rather than being forced. The circle around them loosened slightly, the water no longer pressing inward, but it did not fully release them, did not return to normal. It lingered, watching, waiting. He remained still for another second, then finally shifted his gaze, not away, but downward, as if confirming something unseen. And when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but no less powerful. This is not over, he said, and the certainty in his tone settled into the air like a promise. The ocean did not argue, did not surge forward again, But it did not disappear either. It remained, just beneath the surface, vast and patient, as if accepting this moment not as an end, but as the beginning of something far more dangerous than either of them had yet faced. The pressure in the water did not return, but it did not disappear either, and Emily Carter felt the difference immediately as the surface around them settled into a strange, controlled calm that no longer threatened to consume them yet refused to release them completely. The yacht beneath her feet was still damaged, still tilted, but it had stopped sinking further, as if whatever held it had chosen, for now, to let it remain suspended between two outcomes. Her breathing slowly steadied, though her heart still pounded with the memory of what had just happened, and when she finally looked up at him, truly looked, she understood that nothing about this night had been chance. He stood as he had before, composed, untouched by the cold, untouched by the chaos. His presence no longer hidden behind quiet observation, but revealed in full, something ancient, something that did not belong to storms or accidents. "You stopped it," she said softly, not quite a question, not quite a statement, because even now she could feel the ocean below, waiting, watching, not defeated, only held back. He did not answer immediately, his gaze still fixed on the dark surface, as if confirming what she had already sensed. "I delayed it," he said at last, and the distinction settled heavily between them. The water shifted slightly, not rising, not falling, but reminding them of its presence, a slow movement beneath the surface that suggested patience rather than retreat. Emily swallowed, her mind struggling to hold onto something solid, something real, but there was nothing left of the world she had understood before this moment. "Then what happens next?" she asked, her voice quieter now, more careful, as though the ocean itself might be listening again. This time, he turned to her fully, and the red in his eyes had dimmed just enough to reveal something deeper behind it. Not softness, not vulnerability, but recognition, like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. "That depends," he said, and his gaze dropped briefly to her hand, still gripping his sleeve, still refusing to let go. Emily followed his eyes, only then realizing how tightly she was holding on, how instinctively she had chosen to stay close to him through everything. And for a second, she loosened her grip, uncertain, unsure of what that connection meant. The moment her fingers shifted, the water responded, not violently, not immediately, but with a subtle tightening beneath them, a reminder, a warning. Her breath caught, and without thinking, she held on again. He noticed, of course he noticed, and something unreadable passed through his expression before he looked back toward the ocean. "It will come again," he said quietly, and there was no doubt in his voice, no hesitation, only certainty. The surface below them rippled once, slow and deliberate, as if confirming his words, and far beneath, the massive shape shifted, not rising, not retreating, but turning, as though marking them, remembering them. Emily felt it then, a connection she could not explain, something that had begun the moment she called out to him and had not ended when the ocean pulled back. "Why me?" she asked, the question barely more than a whisper, but it felt louder than anything else in the silence that followed. He did not answer right away, his gaze lingering on the dark water, on whatever lay beneath it, and when he finally spoke, his voice was softer than it had been all night, but far more dangerous because of it. "Because you asked," he said, and the simplicity of the answer sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the cold sea. The yacht creaked softly beneath them, the distant sounds of the remaining crew and passengers slowly returning, unaware of what had truly happened, unaware of what had nearly risen from below, and as the first faint hint of dawn touched the horizon, the ocean looked almost normal again. Almost, but Emily knew better now, because somewhere beneath that surface, something ancient had turned